She went live from a quiet place. Thousands were watching. Then the camera fell, and no one ever saw her again. The stream began the way it always did. Not with drama. Not with urgency. With movement. The camera shook gently as the van rolled over gravel, the sound vibrating through cheap speakers and thousands of headphones at once. Pines passed by the windshield in slow, repeating patterns, tall and indifferent, like they had been standing there long before anyone thought to broadcast themselves driving between them. Lena Cross reached forward and adjusted the phone on its mount. "Okay," she said, smiling at her own reflection before looking directly into the lens. "We're back." The chat reacted immediately. "There she is, Queen of Van Life signals better today. Where are you now?" Lena glanced at the road, then back at the camera. "Somewhere quiet," she said. "Which is the point?" She grinned, casual, practiced. The smile that said, "I'm fine, I'm free, I chose this." The van hummed beneath her words. A low, constant sound, comforting in its consistency. "Last night was rough," Lena continued. "Wind, weird noises, 0 bars. But hey," she lifted one hand briefly from the wheel. "That's the deal." The chat flooded faster. "Brave I could never, aren't you scared?" Lena laughed. "Scared of what?" she said lightly. "Being alone?" She paused, just a fraction too long, then smiled again. Edward Hale would later watch this moment 3 times. Not for what she said, for how quickly she recovered. The stream clock ticked upward in the corner of the screen. 3 minutes and 18 seconds, 3 minutes and 19 seconds, 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Time passed differently when people were watching. Lena knew that better than anyone. She had learned how to stretch minutes and compress hours, how to make long roads feel intimate and silence feel intentional. She had learned where to look when she wanted to appear thoughtful, and when to glance away so it seemed spontaneous. She checked the side mirror. "You guys like this route?" she asked. "It's not on the usual lists. I figured I'd try something less curated." The word curated landed carefully. The chat responded instantly. "Yes, please, hidden gems, tourist traps, algorithm won't like that, lol." Lena chuckled. "Let it try to stop me," she said. She said it like a joke. It wasn't. The road narrowed. Not abruptly. Gradually. Edward would later freeze the frame and mark it. Here, where the asphalt lost its clean edges. Here, where the paint lines faded. Here, where the trees leaned in closer, not blocking the road, but watching it. Lena didn't comment on the change. She rarely commented on transitions. They broke the illusion of effortlessness. The van interior was visible now, as the camera angle shifted slightly. A small bed behind her, neatly made. A string of tiny lights along the ceiling. A mug in the cup holder with faded lettering. Stayed lost. Someone in the chat commented on it. "Love the mug." Lena glanced down. "Oh, that," she said. "Found it at a gas station in Oregon. Or maybe Nevada. Hard to tell after a while." She smiled. "I kind of like not remembering," she added. Edward would pause here too. He would write one word in the margin of his notes. Dissociation. The stream continued. Lena talked about nothing and everything. About waking up cold. About burning toast on a portable stove. About how strange it was to wake up and realize no one knew exactly where you were. "But that's the beauty of it," she said. "You get to reinvent yourself every morning." The chat loved that. "So poetic, I wish I could disappear like that." Lena laughed softly. "Disappear?" she repeated. "No. I'm right here." She tapped the phone lightly with one finger. "You're literally watching me." At 11 minutes and 47 seconds, the signal dipped. The image pixelated briefly, froze, then snapped back into focus. The chat reacted instantly. Lag don't scare us signals acting up. Lena frowned at the screen. Huh? She said. That's weird. I thought I had better coverage here. She checked the map app briefly, angling the phone just enough for the audience to see green terrain and a thin blue line winding through it. No worries, she added quickly. We're good. She said it with the same tone she used whenever something might have been wrong. The tone that reassured others more than herself. Edward would later note how often she said we. The van slowed. Lena took her foot off the accelerator, eyes scanning the roadside. Okay, she said. This is where I'm stopping for the night. The chat exploded. Already? Show us the spot, looks creepy, lol. Lena pulled off onto a patch of flattened dirt, gravel crunching loudly beneath the tires. She parked, turned off the engine, and for a moment, the only sound was wind brushing against metal. Silence amplified. She turned the camera slightly, giving the viewers a glimpse outside. Trees. Tall grass. No buildings. No lights. Just space. Beautiful, right? Lena said. Her voice sounded quieter now. Closer. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood, lifting the phone to switch to the rear camera. The image wobbled briefly as she moved through the van. Let me show you around, she said. This place doesn't even have a name on the map. Edward would later circle that sentence. The camera captured the van door sliding open. Cold air rushed in, audible through the microphone. The sound of insects. Wind and leaves. A distant, indistinct noise that could have been anything. Lena stepped down onto the ground. Okay, she said softly. Yeah, this is nice. The chat slowed. Not stopped, but softened, as if everyone instinctively lowered their voice. It's so quiet. Are you alone out there? Lena smiled at the screen. Always, she said. Then, almost immediately, well, mostly. She walked a few steps away from the van, the camera pointed outward now, showing uneven ground illuminated by the van's interior light and a small lantern hanging from the open door. Edward would later rewind this section repeatedly. The lantern's position, the shadows it cast, the way the light cut off abruptly at the edge of the frame. Lena's breathing was audible now. Not heavy, just present. She laughed softly. Okay, that sounded creepy, she said. I'm fine. Just cold. She turned the camera back toward herself. Her face filled the screen. She looked different. Not frightened. Alert. At 18 minutes and 2 seconds, someone in the chat typed, "Did you hear that?" Lena blinked. "Hear what?" she asked. The chat scrolled. Footsteps? Probably wind. You good? Lena tilted her head slightly, listening. For a second, nothing. Then, a sound. Faint. A shift in the grass. Lena's smile faltered. Probably a deer, she said quickly. She said it like someone repeating a fact they'd learned, not observed. Edward would later note her hand. The one holding the phone. How it tightened. How the frame shook, just slightly. At 19 minutes and 14 seconds, the camera dipped. Not dramatically. As if Lena had adjusted her grip and misjudged the weight. The image tilted toward the ground. Gravel. Boots. The edge of the van door. Hang on, Lena said. Then something off-screen moved. Fast. Not loud. Close. Lena inhaled sharply. Hey, she began. The camera fell. The image hit the ground sideways, capturing nothing but blurred motion and darkness at the edge of the lantern's reach. There was a sound. Not a scream. A startled cry. A single word, cut off too quickly to be clear. The stream froze. The chat exploded. Lena? What was that? Is this a bit? The audio crackled. Then silence. The stream ended, For several seconds, thousands of people stared at a blank screen, waiting, recording, replaying, clipping, rewinding, trying to understand what they had just seen. Edward Hale would later watch the ending frame by frame, not to see what happened, but to understand what Lena had believed would happen next. Within minutes, social media filled with fragments, screen recordings, theories, maps. She planned this fake for views. Someone called the cops. Within an hour, Lena Cross was trending. By morning, she was missing. And by the time Edward Hale was asked to look at the case, one thing was already clear. Lena Cross had not vanished in the dark. She had disappeared in front of an audience. And whatever had happened to her, it had begun long before the camera fell. By the time Edward Hale opened the file, Lena Cross had already been found 3 times. Once in a blurry screenshot that someone swore showed a shadow behind the trees. Once in a slowed-down clip where her voice seemed to say a different word. And once on a map covered in red circles, each one labeled last known location. None of them were real. Edward ignored all 3. He had learned long ago that the first thing a crowd does after losing someone is replace uncertainty with motion. Noise felt like action. Action felt like help. Very little of it was. The official request came from a regional investigative unit that did not usually deal with missing influencers. The message was brief. We have a disappearance linked to a live broadcast. The digital footprint is extensive. We need someone who can interpret behavior. Edward read that sentence twice. Then he closed the laptop and sat still for a moment. Behavior always left cleaner tracks than people expected. The first thing Edward did was not watch the stream. He read the comments. All of them. Not individually. In clusters. He let them scroll past in accelerated motion, not to catch words, but rhythms. Excitement. Concern. Performance. People reacted the way they had been trained to react, quickly, loudly, and publicly. Edward slowed the feed at the moment the camera fell. He watched the chat explode. Lena? This better be fake. Call someone. Then, almost immediately, she's done this before. It's probably a stunt. Genius marketing, honestly. Edward paused. There. That shift. Fear turning into justification. People did not like being scared without permission. They preferred to believe they were being entertained. He opened Lena Cross's channel analytics. Growth charts. Engagement spikes. Geographic heat maps. Edward traced the pattern backward. Every major increase followed the same structure. A riskier location. Less infrastructure. Weaker signal. Longer silences. Viewers stayed longer when the feed felt fragile. Viewers stayed longer when the feed felt fragile. Edward wrote it down. Instability equals retention. He finally watched the stream in full. Not at normal speed. At half. Then at quarter. He watched Lena's eyes more than the frame. How often she checked the screen. How quickly she corrected herself. How she filled gaps before the chat noticed them. At 6 minutes and 41 seconds, she laughed too early. Edward rewound. She had not finished the thought. She had anticipated the response. Edward leaned back in his chair. That was not spontaneity. That was rehearsal. He opened Lena's past stories. Hundreds of them. Short. Ephemeral. Designed to vanish. Edward didn't watch them in chronological order. He grouped them by location type. Forests, deserts. Roadside stops. Unknown areas. The same phrases appeared again and again. Off the grid. No signal. Didn't even know this place existed. Edward circled them. People lied most easily with language they reused. At 2:17 a.m., Edward paused the footage again. The lantern. The shadow line. The place where light stopped abruptly, as if something had absorbed it. He didn't zoom. Zooming created illusion. Instead, he watched Lena's body language. Her shoulders lifted slightly. Not fear. Preparation. Edward whispered to himself. She expected something? The police report arrived shortly after. It was thin. Search teams had gone to the area identified by triangulation. They had found tire tracks. A campsite. Nothing else. No signs of struggle. No blood. No broken equipment. Edward nodded to himself. That fit. Lena Cross did not disappear violently. She disappeared cleanly. Edward made a list. Not suspects. Pressures. Algorithm expectations. Audience reinforcement. Financial dependence. Identity tied to visibility. He added one more. Escalation. Every trip had gone a little further. Every risk had been framed as authenticity. Edward closed the file and stared at the wall. People didn't vanish because they wanted to be gone. They vanished because stopping felt impossible. He called the officer assigned to the case. A woman named Rachel Morgan. Practical. Tired. Already overwhelmed by internet detectives. She planned it, Morgan said immediately. That's what half the comments say. Edward's voice was calm. She planned something, he said. That's not the same thing. Morgan sighed. You think she staged it? She asked. Edward shook his head, even though she couldn't see him. No, he said. I think she trusted the pattern that had always rewarded her. Silence. Then Morgan said quietly, You're saying this was inevitable. Edward didn't answer right away. I'm saying, he replied, that when people perform danger long enough, eventually danger stops performing back. Edward returned to the footage one last time before sleeping. The final sound. Not the cry. The breath before it. That sharp inhale. Not panic. Recognition. Edward closed his eyes. Lena Cross had realized something in that moment. Not that she was in danger. That she had reached a point where there was no way to retreat without breaking the story she'd been telling about herself. He wrote one sentence in his notebook. An audience doesn't push you forward. It just makes stopping feel like failure. Edward closed the notebook. Tomorrow, he would stop watching and start locating. Edward Hale did not begin with geography. That mistake had already been made by thousands of people with internet access and too much confidence. They drew circles. They pinned coordinates. They argued about forests and roads and satellite coverage. Edward began with behavior. He printed screenshots. Not the dramatic ones. The boring ones. A gas station receipt Lena had casually shown on camera. A reflection in a van window revealing a road sign she never mentioned. A 5-second clip of her checking her phone when she thought the stream had frozen. Edward spread them across his desk like fragments of a language no one realized she'd been speaking. Patterns emerged quickly. Not where she went. Why she stopped. Lena Cross did not choose locations. She responded to them. Edward overlaid her travel timeline with her analytics. When engagement dipped, she drove farther. When comments slowed, she stayed longer. When the chat grew restless, she promised, something special tomorrow. Edward marked each escalation with a thin red line. The lines formed a curve. Not outward. Downward. Toward isolation. At 11:43 p.m., Edward paused on a clip from 3 weeks earlier. Lena sat in the van, rain tapping on the roof, smiling into the camera. People keep asking why I go so far out, she said. It's simple. The quiet feels honest. Edward replayed the sentence. Not the words. The emphasis. She stressed far. Not quiet. Edward wrote it down. Distance had become proof. He began mapping recommendation gravity. Not using software. using memory. Edward had spent years watching how systems nudge behavior without ever issuing commands. He opened Lena's public metrics and cross-referenced them with trending travel tags. Every spike aligned with one of three themes: isolation, risk, authenticity. Each time she leaned into one, the algorithm rewarded her. Edward underlined rewarded. Algorithms did not punish caution. They simply ignored it. He watched Lena's collaborations. Few, strategic. She rarely traveled with others for long. Too many voices diluted the brand. Edward paused on a clip where a fellow traveler joked, "You ever think about just staying somewhere normal?" Lena laughed. "Normal doesn't pay for fuel," she replied. The joke landed. Edward did not smile. The route became clearer once Edward stopped thinking in terms of roads. He plotted decisions instead. Each fork where Lena chose the less convenient option. Each moment she ignored comfort for story value. Each time she said, "Why not?" when hesitation would have been wiser. Edward traced those decisions backward. They all pointed to the same invisible pressure. Expectation. He contacted a data analyst who specialized in content behavior. Not officially. Quietly. "What happens," Edward asked, "when a creator trains an audience to expect escalation?" The analyst didn't hesitate. "They escalate," she said. "Or they disappear." Edward closed his eyes briefly. "And which one keeps engagement?" he asked. Silence. Then, "Disappearance," she said. "At least for a while." Edward returned to the final stream again. This time, he muted the audio. He watched Lena's face. Her eyes flicked left twice. Not to the road. To the side mirror. Edward slowed the footage. Reflected in the glass was not a person. Not movement. But space. An opening. A break in the trees that didn't belong to the road. Edward felt a tightening in his chest. That wasn't a threat. That was an invitation. He compared it with older footage. Lena had stopped like that before. Always near liminal spaces. Pull-offs. Unmarked clearings. Places that looked like they might lead somewhere else. Edward wrote another note. She didn't get lost. She followed curiosity shaped by reward. The police search map was wrong. Not because it was careless. Because it assumed intention. Edward redrew it. He marked only places where Lena had ever said the phrase, "Let's see what's out there." 7 locations. 5 safe. 1 abandoned. 1 unknown. Edward stared at the last one. It was not on any official map. But it had appeared twice before. In reflections. In background motion. In a sound clip someone had dismissed as wind. Edward felt certain now. Lena had been here before. Not physically. Digitally. He drove. Not to the last known location. To the first ignored one. The place Lena had almost gone, months earlier, before the signal dropped and she laughed it off. Edward parked and stepped out of his car. The air was cold. Still. Uninterested. He closed his eyes and listened. No road noise. No distant engines. Just space. Edward opened his notebook. The algorithm doesn't tell you where to go. It teaches you what gets rewarded. You do the rest yourself. He stood there for a long time. Then he drove again. Closer now. He wasn't chasing Lena Cross. He was following the path of least resistance for someone who could never afford to stop. At dusk, Edward received a message from Rachel Morgan. "We found the van." Edward didn't ask where. He already knew. The van was parked exactly where Edward expected it to be. Not hidden. Not abandoned in haste. Placed. It stood at the edge of a clearing that didn't appear on any official map, its white exterior muted by dust and pine needles, its tires aligned as if Lena had taken a moment to straighten them before turning off the engine. Edward stopped his car a few meters away and sat still. He didn't rush. Rushing was what Lena had done. The clearing felt unfinished. Not wild enough to be untouched. Not developed enough to feel claimed. A transitional space. Edward stepped out of the car and listened. The silence here was not dramatic. It was administrative. The kind of quiet that suggested nothing further was scheduled. The van door was closed. Unlocked? Edward noted that immediately. People who leave in panic lock doors by accident. People who leave deliberately often don't bother. He slid the door open. The smell inside was familiar. Fabric. Cold metal. Old coffee. Nothing sharp. Nothing wrong. That was the problem. Lena's belongings were still there. Clothes folded. Camera batteries charging from a portable unit. A notebook on the small table, open to a page of half-written thoughts. Edward leaned in. Not to read. To observe. The notebook was angled toward the driver's seat, not the bed. She had been writing while facing forward, thinking about the road. Edward picked up the phone mount. The clamp was loose. Recently adjusted. Not broken. Deliberate. He imagined the moment. Lena stopping the van. Opening the door. Turning back once to check framing. She always checked framing. Outside, the ground told a quieter story. Footprints. Not chaotic. One set leading away from the van. No second set following. Edward crouched and traced the direction with his eyes. The trail led toward the trees. Toward the break he had seen reflected in the mirror. Edward stood slowly. This was where the algorithm ended. There were no metrics beyond this point. He followed the path. Not marked, but obvious to someone looking for it. Branches bent aside. Grass pressed flat. Lena had walked here before. Not in person. In anticipation. Edward felt it now. The sense that this place had existed in her mind long before her body arrived. Halfway in, Edward stopped. He felt it then. The absence of performance. No angles. No light checks. No narration. Just movement. Edward realized something with a quiet certainty. This was the first place Lena Cross had ever gone without imagining an audience. He found the camera at last. Not smashed. Not hidden. Placed on a rock, lens facing outward toward the clearing. Battery dead. Memory card full. Edward removed it carefully. The final file was short. 38 seconds. He didn't watch it immediately. He already knew what it would show. Edward sat on the ground and finally allowed himself to reconstruct it properly. Lena had not been chased. She had not been attacked. She had stepped out of the frame because the frame had become unbearable. Not dangerous. Demanding. He played the final clip. Lena stood in front of the camera. Not smiling. Not performing. Just breathing. "I don't know who I am when no one's watching," she said quietly. The wind moved through the trees behind her. She glanced to the side. Toward the path. "I thought if I kept going," she continued, "I'd find something real." She laughed softly. Not amused. "I did," she said. She reached forward. The image tilted slightly. She adjusted it. Of course she did. Then she stepped out of frame. And did not return. Edward sat with the silence after the clip ended. This was not a mystery with a villain. It was a disappearance shaped by incentives. By reward. By repetition. Lena Cross had not wanted to die. She had wanted to stop. But stopping on camera had never been an option. Search teams would arrive later. They would follow protocol. They would look for signs of struggle, injury, coercion. They would find none. Because there was none to find. Edward knew what the official conclusion would be. Voluntary disappearance. possible misadventure. No evidence of foul play. Technically correct. Edward stood and looked back toward the van, toward the clearing, toward the road beyond. Somewhere, people were still refreshing feeds. Waiting. Assuming. Consuming absence as content. Edward wrote one final note in his notebook before leaving. When a life becomes a performance, the most radical act is to exit the stage. He closed the notebook. Then, quietly, but no one teaches you how to survive once the audience is gone. He returned to his car as dusk settled over the trees. The clearing faded back into anonymity. The van would be towed. The footage archived. The theories would multiply. Edward drove away knowing one thing with certainty. Lena Cross had not vanished into darkness. She had vanished into quiet. And the quiet would never trend. The internet did not slow down when Lena Cross disappeared. It accelerated. Within hours, her last stream had been dissected into thousands of fragments. Clips looped endlessly. Frames were frozen, circled, annotated. Someone isolated the sound of wind. Someone claimed to hear a second voice. Someone swore the shadow near the trees moved against the light. Every theory had a following. Every following felt like proof. Edward Hale watched none of it. He had learned that once an absence becomes content, truth stops being relevant. Lena Cross was officially declared missing 3 weeks later. Not dead. Not alive. Suspended. Her channel remained online. That decision was not emotional. It was contractual. Rachel Morgan called Edward once more, days after the search teams had withdrawn. "They want a statement," she said. "Something clean." Edward understood. Clean meant non-threatening. "She left voluntarily," Morgan continued. "That's the working conclusion." Edward said nothing. "And?" she asked. "And it's true," Edward replied. "Just not the way people want it to be." Morgan exhaled. "They're already turning it into a cautionary tale," she said. "Influencer culture. Risk-taking. Mental health." Edward closed his eyes briefly. "They always do," he said. "It makes the audience feel uninvolved." Lena's subscribers continued to rise for months. Each spike aligned with a new theory video. Each plateau followed an official update. Her absence had become a resource. Edward noted this without judgment. Systems consumed what they were designed to consume. One evening, Edward opened Lena's channel again. Not the comments. The banner. It still read, "Solo. Unfiltered. Real." Edward felt something tighten in his chest. Not anger. Recognition. A private platform meeting was convened weeks later. Executives. Legal advisors. Public relations specialists. Edward attended remotely. Muted. Listening. "We need to discourage this kind of content," one voice said. "Without discouraging engagement," another replied. Edward finally unmuted himself. "You can't discourage escalation," he said calmly. "You can only pretend you didn't reward it." Silence followed. Someone thanked him for his insight. Nothing changed. Emily Carter, a longtime viewer, deleted her social accounts entirely. She didn't announce it. She simply vanished from the comment sections where she'd once been omnipresent. Edward learned this indirectly through data. She had been one of the most consistent participants in Lena's streams. Never demanding. Always encouraging. "You've got this. You're so brave. Can't wait to see what's next." Edward wondered how long it took her to realize encouragement had weight. The van was sold at auction. Quietly. The footage from the final camera was archived and sealed. Not suppressed. Just forgotten. Edward suspected it would resurface one day. Absences always did. Months passed. Lena Cross's name faded from headlines. Then from feeds. Then from memory. but her influence remained. In the pacing of newer creators, in the risks framed as authenticity, in the quiet competition to go just a little further, Edward noticed it everywhere. One night, while scrolling aimlessly, Edward came across a new channel. Different name, different face, same rhythm, same pauses, same careful chaos. The creator smiled into the camera and said, "I don't even know where I am right now." Edward closed the app. He opened his notebook for the last time on this case. He did not write about Lena Cross. He wrote about the audience. Being watched feels like validation, until it becomes obligation. And obligation doesn't end when the camera turns off. Edward closed the notebook and set it aside. Somewhere far from roads and signals, the clearing remained. The van was gone. The tracks erased. Nothing marked the place as significant. That was the final irony. The location that had absorbed millions of views had never wanted to be seen at all. Edward turned off the light and sat in the dark. No screens. No notifications. Just quiet. He breathed. Slowly. Deliberately. The way people did when no one was watching.
If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more psychological mysteries where nothing supernatural is happening, and that's what makes it disturbing. New detective stories are released regularly. Until next time, pay attention to the words people choose.